Captain Sarah Chen stared at the empty escape pod floating in the void, her hands trembling as she read the bioscanner results. The pod was human-made, from the research vessel Harmony that had vanished 3 months ago near the edge of known space. But according to the scanner, whoever had been inside was no longer human. "Ma'am," her communications officer called out, voice tight with fear. "You need to see this." The message was burned into the pod's hull in symbols that hurt to look at. Alien script that seemed to writhe and shift when observed directly. But the translation was clear. "Your kind makes excellent test subjects. We require more specimens." Sarah's blood ran cold. The Harmony had carried 200 souls, including her younger brother Marcus, a brilliant xenobiologist who'd volunteered for the deep space mission to study alien plant life. Now she understood why no distress signal had ever come. The aliens hadn't wanted to destroy the ship. They'd wanted what was inside it. "Captain," her tactical officer reported, "we're detecting massive energy signatures approaching from the asteroid field. Whatever did this, they're coming back." 3 sleek vessels emerged from behind the largest asteroid, their hulls a sickly green that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with predatory grace, completely silent in the vacuum of space. Sarah had never seen ships like these before, but she recognized hunting behavior when she saw it. "All hands to battle stations," she ordered, though she knew their single exploration cruiser was no match for 3 unknown alien warships. "Send an emergency transmission to Earth Command, Priority Alpha." The lead alien ship began charging. What could only be a weapon, a terrible red glow building along its underside. Sarah realized with horror that these creatures had been using the escape pod as bait, waiting for another human ship to investigate. As the weapon reached full charge, Sarah made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. Instead of running, she activated the ship's emergency beacon. Not a cry for help, but a declaration of war. Every human ship within 50 light-years would receive the same message. "They took one of ours. Location attached. Bring everything." The alien weapon fired, bathing her ship in crimson light. The last thing Sarah saw before the bridge exploded was her communications officer's thumbs up. The message had been sent. Earth Command would know. Humanity would know. And when they came looking for answers, they would find something that would change everything. Admiral James Harrison stood before the holographic display in Earth Command's war room, studying the wreckage of the Stargazer, Sarah Chen's ship. The recovery team had found her body clutched around a data pad containing the most disturbing intelligence report in human history. "Show me the footage again," he commanded. The hologram flickered to life, displaying grainy security camera footage from inside an alien facility. Human beings hung in transparent tubes filled with green fluid, their bodies grotesquely modified. Some had additional limbs grafted onto their torsos. Others had their skulls opened, alien technology interfaced directly with their brains. All were conscious, their eyes wide with silent screams. "We've identified 37 crew members from the Harmony," reported Dr. Elizabeth Vasquez, the xenobiology expert, "including Marcus Chen. They're still alive, sir. All of them." Harrison's jaw tightened. In 40 years of military service, he'd seen war, famine, and natural disasters. But this was different. This was torture disguised as science, conducted by beings who viewed humans as nothing more than interesting specimens to dissect and improve upon. "What do we know about these aliens?" he asked. "They call themselves the Kethvar," Dr. Vasquez replied. "Our linguists worked around the clock to translate their communications. They're a hive mind species that's been conquering and experimenting on other races for over 10,000 years. They view biological diversity as raw material for their genetic experiments. And they think humans are particularly interesting raw material," Harrison said grimly. "Yes, sir. Our adaptability, our individual consciousness, our emotional capacity, it all fascinates them. They want to understand what makes us tick so they can incorporate our best traits into their own species." Harrison turned to his fleet commanders. "Recommendations? We mobilize everything," said Fleet Admiral Rosa Martinez, her scarred face hard as stone. "Every ship, every Marine, every pilot. This isn't just about rescue anymore. It's about sending a message to the galaxy that humanity doesn't get experimented on." The Kethvar have technology centuries ahead of ours, warned General Thompson. Their ships are faster, their weapons more powerful. A direct assault would be suicide. Harrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then we don't fight them the way they expect. We fight them the human way. He turned to his staff. I want every special forces operator, every intelligence asset, every dirty trick we've ever learned. The Kethvar think they're studying us, but they're about to get an education. As alarms began blaring throughout Earth Command, calling humanity's scattered fleets home, Harrison stared at the image of Marcus Chen floating in that horrible green fluid. The young man's eyes met the camera with an expression of desperate hope. Hold on, Harrison whispered. We're coming. Part 3. The Fury. Unleashed Lieutenant Jake Morrison crept through the ventilation shaft of the Kethvar research station, his heart hammering against his ribs. The metal was slick with some kind of alien condensation that made every movement treacherous, but he'd crawled through worse during his years as a Navy SEAL. Through the grating below, he could see the horror chamber where humans hung like specimens, in a twisted museum. The sight made bile rise in his throat, but he forced himself to focus. Emotion was a luxury he couldn't afford, not when lives hung in the balance. His earpiece crackled with the voice of Sergeant Maria Santos, positioned 3 levels below. Packages in sight, she whispered. Count 30 human subjects, all showing vital signs. But Jake, some of them have been changed so much I can barely tell they're human anymore. Morrison closed his eyes briefly. The intelligence reports had been right. The Kethvar weren't just studying humans. They were transforming them into something else. Something that might retain human consciousness, but trapped in an alien body. Remember the mission, he whispered back. We're not here to rescue everyone today. We're here to gather intelligence and prove that these stations can be infiltrated. But even as he said it, Morrison knew he was lying to himself. When he looked down through that grating and saw a young woman who couldn't be older than 25, her body partially fused with alien technology, while her human eyes tracked back and forth in obvious terror, he knew there was no way he was leaving without trying to save someone. Screw the mission, he muttered, and began cutting through the grating with his plasma torch. The sound attracted attention immediately. Kethvar guards, tall insectoid creatures with 4 arms and compound eyes, came scuttling into the chamber, with movements that reminded Morrison of spiders. Their weapons hummed with alien energy as they searched for the source of the noise. Morrison dropped through the grating like a falling angel of death. His pulse rifle spoke 3 times in the space of a heartbeat, and 3 aliens collapsed with smoking holes in their chitinous chests. But the sound of gunfire had triggered alarms throughout the station. All teams, go loud, Morrison shouted into his comm. Stealth is blown. This is now a rescue operation. Throughout the massive alien facility, 24 of Earth's most elite soldiers began their assault. They moved like ghosts through corridors designed for creatures twice their size, using humanity's smaller stature as an advantage. Every doorway became a killing field. Every corner became an ambush point. The Kethvar had studied human physiology, but they had never studied human warfare. They had never experienced the fury of soldiers who had seen their own species tortured for scientific curiosity. They had never faced opponents who fought not just for victory, but for vengeance. Morrison reached the woman in the tube and began working at the alien machinery, keeping her suspended. As the green fluid drained away, her eyes focused on his face, and she tried to speak through the breathing apparatus. It's okay, he said, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. We're taking you home. As he lifted her from the tube, Morrison realized that humanity had just fired the opening shot in a war they never wanted, but would finish no matter the cost. The Kethvar Hive Queen Zixthara regarded the smoking ruins of Research Station Omega-7 through her 1,000 compound eyes, each one reflecting a different angle of the devastation. In 4,000 years of existence, she had never experienced failure on this scale. The primitive humans had not only infiltrated her most secure facility, they had rescued 17 specimens and destroyed centuries of research data. Explain? To me, she hissed in the harmonic language of her species, how 24 primitive bipeds succeeded where our greatest military minds predicted certain failure. Supreme Commander Vethicol, his carapace bearing fresh scars from the human assault, clicked his mandibles nervously. The humans employed tactics we did not anticipate, Hive Queen. They utilized their smaller size to access areas we considered secure. They demonstrated a willingness to sacrifice themselves for their fellows that our predictive models classified as statistically impossible. Impossible? Zexthera's voice rose to a shriek that shattered crystal formations throughout the chamber. 700 of our warriors dead. Our most valuable research specimens stolen, and our station reduced to floating debris. And you call their success impossible? The truth was more disturbing than tactical failure. The humans had fought with a combination of technical skill and primal fury that the Kethvar had never encountered. Their warriors had used crude projectile weapons to devastating effect, turning the station's own architecture against its defenders. When cornered, they had detonated explosive devices with themselves still in the blast radius, choosing death over capture. Most unsettling of all, the human soldiers had displayed individual initiative that went far beyond their mission parameters. Instead of simply gathering intelligence as intercepted communications suggested, they had improvised a full-scale rescue operation the moment they witnessed the experiments. This suggested a level of emotional processing that the Kethvar found both fascinating and terrifying. We must accelerate the war timeline, Xthara decided. If humans can conduct operations of this sophistication, they represent a greater threat than initially calculated. Prepare the Grand Fleet. Hive Queen, Vethkol ventured carefully. Perhaps we should continue to study them rather than— No! The psychic scream that erupted from Xthara's mind stunned every Kethvar in the chamber. Several of the smaller drones collapsed, their neural systems temporarily overloaded. They have seen too much. They know too much. The human specimens who escaped will carry knowledge of our methods back to their leaders. She was right to be concerned. At that very moment, Marcus Chen was sitting in a debriefing room aboard the human carrier Retribution, describing in methodical detail every aspect of Kethvar technology he had observed during his captivity. His scientific training, combined with 3 months of forced observation, had given him insights into alien capabilities that would prove invaluable in the coming war. They're not invincible, Marcus told Admiral Harrison, his voice hoarse from the breathing apparatus damage. Their technology is impressive, but it relies on biological integration. They've never had to face opponents who could turn their own advantages against them. Harrison leaned forward. What do you mean? Marcus managed a thin smile despite the trauma he'd endured. They think in terms of assimilation and integration. They've never fought anyone who specialized in breaking things beyond repair. Give me a team of engineers and some creative demolitions experts, and I can show you how to turn their own stations into death traps. As Marcus began sketching alien systems from memory, Zexthera was finalizing plans for humanity's destruction. She could not know that her decision to escalate would play directly into human strengths: chaos, adaptability, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. The war between species was about to begin in earnest, and both sides were about to discover things about themselves they never knew existed. The Kethvar Grand Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system like a plague of metal locusts. 300 warships, each one the size of a human city, arranged themselves in perfect geometric formations that spoke of hive-mind coordination beyond human comprehension. Aboard the flagship Eternal Convergence, Hive Queen Zexthera felt the collective satisfaction of her species as they gazed upon the blue-white marble that was humanity's homeworld. Soon, every human would be catalogued, studied, and incorporated into the Kethvar genetic matrix. The primitive species that had dared to strike at her research station would become nothing more than useful DNA sequences in the greater tapestry of Kethvar evolution. Begin the initial bombardment of their orbital defenses, she commanded. Leave the planetary surface intact. We require the specimens alive. But as the first wave of Kethvar plasma cannons charged their deadly energies, space around Earth suddenly came alive with movement. What the aliens had dismissed as primitive orbital infrastructure began to unfold like deadly flowers. Hidden asteroid mining platforms revealed themselves to be weapons batteries of staggering size. Seemingly inactive communications satellites deployed armor plating and powered-up railgun systems that could punch holes through starship hulls. Most shocking of all, the moon itself began to bristle with defensive installations that had been cleverly disguised as research facilities. Impossible, Vethkol whispered, as his sensors registered the true scope of human preparation. They have transformed their entire system into a fortress. Admiral Harrison's voice cut through space on an open channel, transmitted from the bridge of the massive human dreadnought Defiance. This is Admiral James Harrison of the Terran Defense Force. You came to our system uninvited. You tortured our people. You experimented on our children. Now you're going to learn why humanity has survived every extinction event our planet has ever thrown at us. The Battle of Sol began with a symphony of destruction that lit up the void, like a newborn star. Human railguns fired tungsten projectiles at relativistic speeds, turning Kethvar shields into useless energy displays. Missile swarms launched from hidden positions throughout the asteroid belt, each one guided by human pilots who had volunteered for one-way missions. But it was the human fighters that truly shocked the Kethvar. Tiny, single-pilot craft that should have been insignificant gnats against kilometer-long warships, instead moved like angry wasps, exploiting every weakness in alien ship design. Human pilots pushed their craft beyond safety limits, using G-forces that would crush most species to execute maneuvers that violated conventional physics. Their fighters are operating at accelerations that should liquefy organic tissue, reported a Kethvar tactical analyst, his voice thick with confusion. Exthara watched in growing horror as her perfectly coordinated fleet began to fall apart under the chaotic human assault. Kethvar tactics relied on predictable responses and logical decision-making, but humans seemed to delight in making tactically questionable choices that somehow worked through sheer audacity. When Kethvar boarding parties attempted to take human ships, they found themselves facing defenders who had rigged their own vessels with explosives rather than allow capture. When alien commanders attempted to retreat from untenable positions, human pilots rammed their fighters into engine ports with kamikaze determination. Most disturbing of all, human ship captains were making independent tactical decisions without waiting for orders from high command. The entire human fleet operated like a pack of apex predators, each unit supporting the others while maintaining individual initiative that the hive-mind Kethvar could not predict or counter. As the Eternal Convergence took its third critical hit from human plasma torpedoes, Zexthara finally understood the magnitude of her miscalculation. She had been studying human specimens in isolation, never considering how they might behave as a unified species facing extinction. "All ships," she commanded, her psychic voice tinged with something the Kethvar had rarely experienced. "Fear. Retreat to hyperspace. We regroup and—" Her order was cut short as the human dreadnought Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly above the Kethvar flagship. Admiral Harrison had somehow predicted her retreat vector and positioned his ship for a point-blank assault. "This is for the Harmony." Harrison's voice echoed across space as every weapon on his ship fired simultaneously. The Eternal Convergence died in a ball of fusion fire, taking the Hive Queen and her command staff with it. Across the battlefield, leaderless Kethvar ships began to scatter as their perfect coordination collapsed into chaos. Humanity had won its first major victory, but they all knew it was just the beginning. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, the war had transformed from a simple conflict into something approaching genocide, but not in the way the Kethvar had planned. Commander Elena Vasquez crouched in the ruins of what had once been Kethvar Colony Designation 447 Beta, watching through her scope as the last alien transport lifted off from the planet's surface. The evacuation was proceeding exactly as her intelligence team had predicted. The Kethvar were abandoning another world, rather than face what they had begun calling the human plague. Thermal signatures show approximately 10,000 civilian Kethvar aboard that transport, reported Sergeant Chen, Marcus's cousin, who had volunteered for the deep strike units after learning what had happened to his family. "ROE says we let them go." Elena nodded grimly. The rules of engagement were clear. Humanity would not target non-combatants, even alien ones. It was one of the principles that separated them from their enemies. But watching another ship full of potential intelligence, assets disappear into hyperspace still stung. "Intel reports indicate they're falling back to the core worlds," she said into her comm. "Same pattern as the last 6 colonies. They strip everything valuable and run the moment they detect human ships in the system." It was a development that no one had anticipated. After their devastating defeat at Sol, the Kethvar had abandoned their aggressive expansion and begun a systematic retreat from their outer territories. But it wasn't cowardice. It was strategic consolidation. Every abandoned colony was stripped of resources and booby-trapped. Every retreat was covered by sacrificial rearguard actions that cost human lives. Most troubling of all, the aliens were learning. Recent engagements showed clear adaptation to human tactics. Kethvar ships now traveled in smaller, more flexible formations. Their boarding parties wore armor specifically designed to counter human weapons. Some of their commanders had even begun exhibiting individual initiative that mimicked human unpredictability. "Ma'am," Chen called out, his voice tight with concern. "You need to see this." Elena followed him to what remained of the colony's research center. Inside, they found rows of cylindrical tanks similar to those used for human experimentation. But these contained something different. Kethvar specimens, floating in preservation fluid, their bodies surgically modified with human DNA. "They're experimenting on themselves now," Elena whispered, studying the grotesque fusion of human and alien physiology. "They're trying to understand us by becoming us." The implications were staggering. If the Kethvar could successfully integrate human traits, individual creativity, tactical flexibility, emotional resilience, they would become infinitely more dangerous. Worse, some of the specimens showed signs of enhanced physical capabilities that went far beyond normal human limits. Elena's comm unit crackled with an emergency transmission from Fleet Command. "All deep strike units, abort current missions and return to Rally Point Alpha. Priority 1. As they hurried back to their extraction point, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had won the opening battles of this war, only to face something much worse. The Kethvar weren't just retreating, they were evolving. 3 hours later, aboard the carrier New Horizon, Admiral Harrison delivered the news that changed everything. "Long-range reconnaissance has confirmed our worst fears. The Kethvar have successfully created hybrid warriors that combine their hive mind coordination with human individual initiative. Early engagement suggests these hybrids are stronger, faster, and more tactically flexible than either parent species." The holographic display showed grainy footage of a Kethvar hybrid in combat, moving with inhuman speed while making tactical decisions that displayed distinctly human creativity. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Furthermore, Harrison continued, "Intelligence suggests they're preparing for a final offensive against Earth using these hybrid forces. They call it the Convergence Protocol, an all-or-nothing assault designed to capture sufficient human specimens to complete their transformation into a hybrid species." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The Kethvar weren't trying to destroy humanity anymore. They were trying to become humanity while retaining their own strengths. If they succeeded, the resulting species would be unstoppable. "What are our orders, sir?" asked Colonel Martinez. Harrison's smile was sharp as a blade. "We're going to show them that the most dangerous thing about humans isn't our individual traits. It's what happens when we stop playing by the rules entirely." The final battle for humanity's survival began not in space, but in the deepest vaults beneath Earth's surface, where Dr. Marcus Chen worked feverishly on humanity's last desperate gambit. The neural feedback cascade should propagate through their hive mind network within seconds, he explained to Admiral Harrison, his hands shaking as he made final adjustments to the device that might save or damn their species. "But we'll only get one shot. If this fails—" "It won't fail," Harrison said with conviction he didn't entirely feel. "It can't." Above them, the largest space battle in human history raged across the solar system. The Kethvar hybrid fleet, combining alien technology with human tactical unpredictability, had broken through the outer defenses and was closing on Earth. Their new hybrid warriors fought with a terrifying combination of hive mind coordination and human creativity that made them nearly unstoppable. Commander Elena Vasquez led her deep strike team through the corridors of the Kethvar flagship Genesis of Unity, fighting desperately to reach the central command node. The hybrids they faced were nightmarish combinations of human and alien features, retaining the best traits of both species while discarding the weaknesses. "They're adapting to our tactics in real time," Sergeant Chen reported over the comm, his voice strained as he took cover from hybrid plasma fire. "It's like fighting ourselves, but stronger and faster." Elena watched one of her Marines fall to a hybrid that moved with spider-like agility while wielding human weapons with perfect precision. The creature's compound eyes tracked multiple targets, simultaneously, while its human-derived brain calculated firing solutions that would have impressed any marksman. "All teams, focus fire on the neural crown structures," she ordered, identifying the cybernetic implants that connected the hybrids to the hive mind. "Cut their network connection, and they lose coordination." But even as individual hybrids fell, others adapted their tactics to protect the neural crowns. It was like fighting an enemy that learned from every casualty, every mistake, every small victory. Meanwhile, in Earth's deepest bunkers, Marcus Chen completed his work on the weapon that might end the war, a viral code designed to exploit the very network connections that made the Kethvar so formidable. But it required direct interface with their command structure, which meant someone had to get close enough to upload it manually. "I'll do it," Elena volunteered over the comm from the enemy flagship. "We're already inside their command section." "Negative," Harrison replied. "The feedback could kill any human in direct contact with their network." "Then I guess I'd better upload it fast," Elena said, and cut the connection before anyone could argue. She reached the central command node as alarms throughout the hybrid fleet began screaming warnings. The Kethvar had detected the human infiltration and were converging all forces on their position. Elena's team held the corridor as she worked frantically to interface Marcus's device with alien technology. "Upload at 60%, she reported as hybrid warriors pressed closer. 70, 80. A hybrid commander burst through her team's defensive line, moving with impossible speed toward Elena's position. Sergeant Chen intercepted it with a sacrifice play that bought precious seconds as the upload reached 95%. "Elena, get out of there!" Marcus's voice crackled through the comm. "The cascade is beginning!" But Elena had seen something in the hybrid commander's eyes. A flicker of human consciousness trapped within the alien collective. These creatures weren't just weapons. They were prisoners of their own transformation, aware but unable to break free from the hive mind's control. "Upload complete," she reported as the viral code spread through the Kethvar network like wildfire. "And Marcus? Tell them we didn't just win. We set them free." The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic for the hive mind. Across the fleet, hybrid warriors suddenly found their individual consciousness unleashed from collective control. Some fell to their knees in confusion. Others turned on their purely Kethvar commanders with newfound fury. The perfect coordination that had made them so dangerous collapsed into chaos as hundreds of newly freed minds experienced individual will for the first time. On Earth, humanity watched as the most dangerous enemy they had ever faced tore itself apart from within. The Kethvar Empire, built on the subjugation of individual will to collective purpose, could not survive the introduction of true human consciousness into its ranks. As the hybrid fleet scattered in all directions, some seeking revenge against their creators, others simply fleeing to find their own purpose, Admiral Harrison stood in the observation deck of Earth's primary orbital station. "What happens now?" asked Dr. Vasquez, watching the alien ships disappear into hyperspace. Harrison smiled, thinking of Elena Vasquez's final transmission and Marcus Chen's brilliant solution. "Now we help them figure out what it means to be free. After all, that's what humans do best. We survive, we adapt, and we help others do the same." The war was over, but humanity's greatest challenge was just beginning, teaching an entire species what it meant to choose their own destiny. It was a lesson that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come, spreading the most dangerous idea in the universe, that every conscious being deserves the right to determine their own fate. In the end, humanity had won not through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but by doing what they had always done best, refusing to accept that freedom was impossible, even for their enemies.